guess yet? So you still can't talk because you don't guess. Tell me when you give up. When you give up, it just means you can't talk.
Good evening, Johnson County. We are live on Facebook and out in internet land. I am your host for the next 2 hours, Professor Turner. I am joined in studio tonight by our lovely lady on the keyboard, Miss Jennifer. The co-hostess with the mostess, Jennifer.
You have hostess?
I looked at. We could get some Twinkies and some cupcakes. That'll be all right. We've got our good friend Chad sitting in, keeping us all in line. We're also joined in studio by another host of one of Johnson County JoCo communities. It's one of those days, guys. One of JoCo Radio's other most successful shows, Miss Denise. And Denise, who do you have with you this evening?
We have my adorable son, William.
Hi.
And here I thought that was a chupacabra.
Are there any visitors in the room that we are not seeing?
There's a dog on the floor. Does that count?
He's not a dog. He's family.
Sorry, he's a fur baby. I was barking up the wrong tree with that one. Yeah. Of course, my jokes can be a little rough sometimes. I just don't want to step in a poodle.
Well, for those of you that are listening and you cannot see us on Facebook, I have my tribute to our honorable colleague who will victoriously one day return and take over the helm. I have a shirt. Jennifer, would you please do the best to describe it? It's either My Little Pony and she's playing a very large trick on me, or...
Hold on 1 second, I'm switching the cameras for you. It is Sasquatch, Bigfoot, with a cowboy hat on, riding the Loch Ness Monster.
It's a very large pony.
That's like the Loch Ness Monster. It could be a pony, but...
Right, it's not a pony, it's a water horse. Get your cryptozoology right. That's that voice.
So that's in for our colleague, Kevin, who will soon return.
And Josh is also
I am also wearing mine. I've got Bigfoot doesn't believe in you either. And Kevin, we know you're out there and we know you're paying attention, and we'll be glad when you're able to come back and rejoin us because we miss you, man.
Shout out.
So what are we talking about tonight? Are we going to...
Well...
We left off at one point.
We've left off on a few points. We're going to start off tonight with a slightly different schedule than we usually do. We're going to start off with our very favorite Facebook game. Now, this is the game where I bring in stuff from my museum. We show it to the good folks at home. If they know what it is, if they have an educated guess, they can actually type in the answer, and we'll let them know if they're right or not. And the winner will actually even get some JoCo Community Radio swag. Nice. Ball caps, bracelets, that kind of fun stuff. So if you want to hold that over by one of the cameras, wherever that might be now, and let the folks at home get a good, nice view at it.
I knew I should have got a manicure instead of a pedicure.
Everyone, the silence is deafening.
Well, tonight you're in for a treat, Chad. This is our smallest object that we've talked about, and with the exception of Emma, I think it's probably our neatest object. So whenever you're ready, we'll hand that over to Chad. Chad, this is a one-hander.
One-hander. I heard something thump, so I was afraid it dropped.
No, that was a chupacabra cell phone.
Okay.
Can't take monkeys with you anywhere.
It's flat on the bottom on one. There's a smooth edge on the very bottom down here, which makes me wonder if that's where... Or you've told me when they are digging something out, they put some sort of...
Sometimes when we dig things out in the field, we put them on what's called a pedestal. Basically, we dig the ground out from underneath them and raise up all but what is directly underneath them. And the more debris we move, the more it kind of raises up and it stands on a column. In this particular case, I was not present at the excavation of this thing, And in all honesty, I'm not even sure where it was originally collected, so that may just be circumstantial.
So what I'm feeling on it, there are some very not sharp edges, but it's multifaceted. It's smooth on the top.
Mm-hmm. Now, pay particular attention to the side that feels different than the rest of them. Not the smooth underside, but what I would consider the top.
The top, okay.
I have some ideas, but I'm not going to shout them out. Can you describe the color to him?
The color is a very dark black with a little bit of... There's some varying shades of black and gray, and it's almost...
There's almost an emerald undertone to it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of iridescence to it.
So do you know what this is?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. Bear Bear. Hey, buddy. There are wires, my friend. You cannot just go hunting. I am genuinely befuddled.
Okay. Well, hi, Befuddled. I'm Professor Turner.
Well, I can see it, and I don't know what it is. So there you go.
Well, now, did you get a chance to hold it, too?
I did briefly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey Wayne Smith just joined and said, "Hi all. Any word on Sasquatch?"
Sasquatch is holding steady. The condition is unfortunately stable, so he's basically in the same shape that he was last week.
For those of you that don't know, he has a severe appearance deficit, and even with him wearing a batter's or a catcher's mask and the sunburn that then ensued, it did not make any impressions.
He's not cute like Chad and I are.
No.
I mean,
We're swell lookers.
I'm an easy 7. Chad's a 10.
I'm a New York City 10.
Did something like this make an appearance in Joe Dirt?
It did.
Oh!
Or it might have. I don't want to spoil
Joe
that
Dirt.
movie for someone, but that it's not what that one turned out to be. I promise.
Because
It took me a second.
my first guess was, well, that's a big old space.
Uh-huh. Okay, go back to that word. The word you...
Space.
Yes, the final frontier.
So that could... Well,
No one can hear you scream.
Okay, so what... If passed back to me, it doesn't...
Full circle.
It doesn't feel... Well, it is definitely heavier.
Oh, it's heavy.
So, I mean, for its size, it is significantly heavy. But honestly, Emma was very heavy for her size, and I mean that in the kindest way about your baby.
Someone asked if we could hold it up to the camera again. And Justin Ward says, "Do y'all like cake pops?"
I like cake pops. What's a
Who
cake pop?
doesn't like cake pops?
I've never had a cake pop.
It's cake on a...
Little
Cake on
ball
a
of
stick.
cake on a stick.
I would love a piece of cake on a stick. That would be great.
I think there, just like it was in Something About Mary, I think we need to have more meats on the stick.
That would be good.
I'm sorry, I did not mean
No, you did.
to offend our vegan sensitivities.
It's okay. She's used to it.
So easily not offended.
I'm holding it up to the camera.
Just don't leave us alone.
Jeffrey Wayne Smith. There's the smooth side. I could never be a weather woman.
Huh. So with those other intricate sides
No, the back.
and that one side, that's really interesting.
Should I do the back?
No.
Thank you, Vanna. Lovely job.
Yes, wonderful.
Moon rock?
You are really, really, really close.
Meteorite, says Jeffrey Wayne Smith.
Jeffrey Wayne Smith nailed it. This is a meteorite. Now, the cool thing about this,
Is it really?
it is. It really is. Is that right? Want to see it again?
So
Somehow
Jeffrey
it's a little
Wayne
bit more
Smith,
impressive when you know what
you
you're
will be
looking at.
getting
It
a
is.
message from probably one of us. So if you don't have Facebook Messenger enabled, you'll get a request soon, and then we'll figure out how to get you your swag.
Yeah, most definitely. So I brought that in. Well, let me back up. All of the items that we, play show and tell with on tonight's show are former exhibit pieces in the Turner Museum of Natural History, which was my one-time museum that I founded and curated. It was a lifetime collection of over 5,000 specimens and artifacts, with each piece in there being unique and having an individual story to it. Now, the cool story about this meteorite, like I told Chad, I have no idea where it was found originally. I know very, very little about it, which kind of sucks as a scientist, and it's kind of frustrating, but at the same time, it means there's a whole lot more detective work to do. There's a whole lot more snooping around and things to try and figure out. The way that I came into possession of that particular specimen, I'm a huge flea market guy. I love flea markets. And the one on Saturday morning that they have down the road, over the bridge and past the courthouse in Cleburne, is one of my favorites. Birds Flea Market, or maybe Birds is Wednesday. But I've been going to these flea markets for long enough and buying enough weird stuff that I've kind of become famous or infamous in those circles. And people will approach me. They'll be like, hey, would you mind looking at this? Or, hey, could you come over and check this out? Or, in some cases, hey, I've got this really weird thing. Would you like it? And you'd be amazed how much stuff the museum was able to acquire that way. And some really cool stuff. Well, this particular specimen, I was walking along, and this little teeny tiny Mexican guy comes up to me, and he says, he takes his cowboy hat off, and he says, excuse me, senor, are you the museum guy? And I said, yeah, I sure am. He goes, would you come with me? I got something I want to show you. I said, okay. So he takes me over to the corner where he's got his stall set up under this great big pecan tree. And he walks under the tree, pulls this great big wheelbarrow full of rocks out, and is just beaming when he pushes it over to me. He goes, I tell you what, you a good man. I sell you a whole wheelbarrow full of rocks and wheelbarrow, $200. And I said, well, I don't really need a wheelbarrow full of rocks. But I learned a long time ago, you don't pass up stuff like this without looking over it. Yeah. So I said, well, let me think about it. Let me kind of see what you've got going on, and maybe we can work something out. So he goes to serve some other customers, and I'm kind of palming my way through it, seeing what he's got and what he doesn't. The majority of it was not museum quality at all, but about halfway through, I found this. And if there was ever a time in my life that I had to use a poker face, that was that. Because I see it, and I'm mentally checking off some of the identifying characteristics. I was like, okay, on the top, it's pockmarked. That's where it burnt up coming into the Earth's atmosphere. The shape is incredibly irregular. That was also the result of it breaking up and burning when it came down. If you take a magnet to this, it's highly magnetic.
Really?
Oh, yes. It's also, and I learned this thanks to some old professors of mine at TCU, it contains at least 3 examples of rare earth elements. The most common among them, the most easily known, is iridium. And iridium is just something that doesn't show up a whole lot on planet Earth, but it's super common in the meteorites that tend to end up here sometime. So I'm seeing all this, and I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm thinking, yeah, you need this. But I don't want to pay $200 for this. So I was like, okay, just poker face. We're just going to play it cool. We're just going to kind of play dumb. So no. Professor Turner has a little bit more money than that. So I hold it up, and I said, how much for this one? And he looks at me, he goes, for you, $2. And I said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to give you a 5. Just, number one, and I'm thinking this, I'm going to give you a 5 to clear my conscience. But yeah, a $5 meteorite, that's not bad at all. And after I got it, I took it to some of my colleagues at TCU. They have a phenomenal meteorite collection. That's one of the largest in the United States, maybe the second or third largest in the world. And I said, hey, would you mind checking this out and telling me what you think, and is it a meteorite or is it something else?
Like Joe Dirt.
Yeah, like Joe Dirt, which Most definitely was not a meteorite. Have you ever seen that?
Dirt.
Joe
A
Dirt.
long time ago. Long time ago.
That's a good movie. So they told me after a week's worth of examination that there is a 97.9% chance that this is a meteorite. That's close enough for me. And, if nothing else, that's a hell of a thing to find at the flea market. Mm-hmm. So, I bring that in tonight because we are going to venture out into outer space in this evening's episode. We're going to talk about a really interesting topic known as exogenesis. Now, exogenesis is an idea that's been floating around since the mid to late 70s and has kind of enjoyed waves of prominence in the recent future. We're going to get Denise sorted out here. I think you came unplugged.
That happened to me last week. Harry's underneath it.
Oh, sorry, buddy. I'm sorry. Okay.
The question is, where does it plug in? Do you see somewhere that's the other end?
I thought it went up here into this box.
Is it? Oh.
Yeah, right.
Here.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer. Oh, yep. I am so sorry. You're way down there for nothing.
That's okay. I was a theater major.
So you really were a drama queen. But anyways.
Oh!
I was
What?
a stage manager.
Oh, you didn't even get to be a drama queen.
Oh.
You were one of the kids that got stuck in the back.
I was the one that made the drama queens look good.
Oh, okay. Look, I like that. So anyways, exogenesis. Exogenesis is the idea, and there's several different perspectives we can take this from. But in its most scientific terms, it is the idea that life did not originate on planet Earth. Or it's the idea that the components of life did not naturally occur on planet Earth. Basically, what some of these theories hold is that in the early days of Earth history, I mean, this is real dawn of time type stuff, when there was no atmosphere, there was nothing else. The Earth was being constantly bombarded by big meteorites, little meteorites, all sorts of space junk. And in some of these pieces of space junk were the necessary amounts of chemicals, the necessary amounts of elements, all of the stuff that would later get together, and when I say later, I mean billions of years later, get together and form the basic building blocks of life. And, life has to come from somewhere. It's got outer space, could be as good explanation as any. Now, there's a few different versions of exogenesis. If you take that one and set it aside, in that one it's saying that, okay, in that exogenesis, all of the compounds, all of the stuff that we needed from life arrived here in the early days. That's how that got set up. Another version of life says that in a time about 550 million years ago, extraterrestrial impacts, extraterrestrial material was responsible for what's referred to as paleontologists as the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion is a time in the fossil record when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you have just a multitude of multi-celled, really bizarre, really incredible looking aquatic life pops up just out of nowhere. I mean, if you're looking at the fossil record, you have a whole lot of nothing, and then boom, it's like everybody's weird relatives show up in the swimming pool all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And one of the thoughts that has been put forth on that is that, okay, maybe this stuff was brought in from extraterrestrials, maybe something else happened. Scientists are still working on the best explanations for what caused the Cambrian explosion. And again, this is 540 million years ago, so there's no mammals, there's no dinosaurs, there's no plants. All of the life on Earth is very primitive, and it's purely aquatic. It's out in the oceans.
Now, Denise, what are you thinking at this point?
Well, we're going to get to Denise's here in a second.
Okay.
Okay.
And Denise's is a little bit more out there, but that's one of the things that what I'm trying to do right now is I'm just trying to look at this from a more scientifically.
Okay.
I don't want to say accepted, but a scientifically
Theorized.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit more traditional view than the left field that we're about to go into, because that's one of the cornerstone thoughts about this show and what we try to do is we like to take these unusual topics, these unusual stories, and look at them from all angles and to discuss them open-mindedly and intelligently. So that is how a traditional scientist who is looking at the ideas of exogenesis would interpret it, how he might discuss it with his colleagues. Now, an even more traditional scientist would look at that the Cambrian explosion, which took place in a formation of rocks called the Burgess Shale, and he would say, "Yeah, that's nothing. We just haven't found the right rock outcrop that has the pre-Cambrian explosion stuff." So,
Is that the same as what we call the Big Bang?
yeah, the Big Bang would actually be prior to this. The Big Bang would be the first example of exogenesis, and the Cambrian explosion would be the second. They call it an explosion just because there's so many seemingly out of nowhere. So those are the first two examples of exogenesis. Denise is going to tell us about another kind of exogenesis. And I'm going to kind of let Denise take the wheel for a little while, because this is one that she's much better versed in than I am. So please, Denise, enlighten us.
I don't know about much better versed. Basically, though, we kind of touched on it last week, and what I look at is more of a historical. It's a biblical view, but it's not necessarily a traditional Christian view. It's truly a history search that someone else has studied, and I've kind of followed their lead on this. And there's some experts out there that I think have it pretty down to a scientific art, if you will. What they look at is not necessarily a Big Bang theory, but more of God's creation, and then Genesis 6, where God's creation was corrupted by Satan and his fallen angels. And what they...
Could it be Satan?
Satan?
Definitely
Church
Satan.
Saturday Night Live reference.
Definitely Satan. And I brought a couple of books, and I wish, Chad, that I was really good at describing some of the photos. But basically, the first book is Angel Wars, and it has a good angel all in white with wings, and he has what William would describe as a lightsaber. And then, of course, there's the evil angel who has wings, but they're more of the
Scaly.
good.
So they're
good
more
job.
like pterodactyl
Scaly,
pterosaurs.
yeah, just kind of an evil looking guy. And basically, the premise behind all of my collection is, any time that God does something spectacular, Satan comes behind him and tries to mimic it. And of course, because it's being duplicated, it's not always the same, and we all know that it's obviously not good. But it's kind of like a
You're the devil in disguise. Oh yes, you are, devil in disguise. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a perfect lead into it.
That's okay. I've never heard that song.
That's a good song.
But it's almost like a cosmic chess match. God moves, Satan moves. God moves, Satan moves. And with each time that God does something spectacular, Satan wants to mimic it, but then ultimately is trying to destroy that which God has created. And so that's kind of my take on it. And of course, I can go all sorts of left with that.
Well, go as far left or as far right, or go whichever direction you'd like to. Please, this is
Chad,
your
Jennifer,
I'm
thoughts?
going to Hollywood, the TV series Supernatural, with
Okay.
Jensen Ackles and I forget the other guy, where they're fighting the different the angels and the.
Move up on Mike.
Well, I'm on the one that doesn't like to be heard.
There you are.
Where the angels and the demons are fighting each other.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. It's the same premise, and I think that I'm not a huge fan, but I have watched the new program Lucifer. Have you guys watched that or
It's
paid
not on
attention?
Netflix.
It's not?
No.
Okay, it's on like Channel 4 or something. I did watch it for a bit, and because it goes a little bit too far away from a Christian view, I had to not watch it anymore.
I found it when it was like on season 2,
Mhm.
and I wanted to go back and watch season 1, and it wasn't available.
Yeah, it was interesting, definitely interesting. But when I am definitely all about looking into new things and new theories and ideas and being open-minded. But when Hollywood is painting Lucifer as the good guy and God's all of a sudden the bad guy because he won't forgive Lucifer for what he has done, I had to back off of that one. Because
See-
I do still stand on a Christian.
And Hollywood does not. Some of the Christian, some of the Bible stories that we grew up with, Hollywood really doesn't do a very good job with, and I certainly don't.
See that
I
one?
don't think treat them with the amount of respect that they deserve. When you were talking about that and you brought up Hollywood, the first thing that popped in my mind was that awful movie with Russell Crowe, Noah, where it was the retelling
Yeah.
of Noah's Ark.
Yes.
That was atrocious. That's the third movie in my lifetime that I've ever walked out on.
Yeah.
And I want to say I made it. Well, I waited until they loaded the animals in the ark, just because I wanted to see what would get on the boat.
Right.
And there was stuff that had been extinct since the time of the dinosaurs that got on Noah's Ark. There was stuff that they just made up. There was it was a silly movie. And then there was those rock monster
Yeah.
things. And
I
God
saw that.
was not a very nice God in that movie.
Yeah. Well, and that's, it started out when I saw the trailer for that movie, and the only reason that I wasted any time watching it is because I thought maybe it was going to go along with some of the history that I had studied in the giants and the reason for God. Because you guys remember last week we talked about God destroyed the earth, not because he is a homicidal maniac, but because Satan had counteracted and created these giants that were not good, and they were corrupting what God had created. And so initially when I saw the trailer, I'm like, okay, this is somebody that's actually going to shed a little bit of truth in history. But yes, it went way left, and it was bizarre, and I didn't care for it much.
Oh yeah, it was weird. And isn't it weird? Russell Crowe has been in every time period. He was a gladiator, he was a cowboy, and then he built Noah's Ark. So what does that say about Russell Crowe? I think that kind of makes Russell Crowe an alien, or some kind of non-human.
But he sure was hot in Gladiator.
Yes, he was.
Chad and I'll have to take your word for it. That's not
Yep.
the way we
So-
roll.
Yep.
So
I don't judge people on their looks.
But he
I
very-
saw you checking out that lady. You're not fooling me. No, so this is really sad. For the third year in a row, it was brought to my attention that today is my anniversary,
Oh,
and
well, happy anniversary.
I failed to remember.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm a horrible wife.
How long have you guys been married?
Thank you. About 15 years.
No kidding.
Do we need to buy you a calendar?
I looked at my calendar several times today.
Do we need to sing happy anniversary to you?
You got married
Okay.
on 420.
I don't think. Yeah. So yes, how many horrible things can happen on? Maybe that's why I forget it every year. With Waco,
Yeah.
Hitler's
Oh, fine.
That was
birthday.
yesterday.
What
When-
else?
When was Hitler's birthday?
I think it's today.
Well, I did not see that.
My
Neither
word.
does Chad.
I'm not fast enough.
It's okay. It's okay, Chad. I'm not raking the head.
And it's
There's some other things that happened historically today. I just
All
can't.
right. So
So
let's take.
and
your-
for those of you that are at home today and celebrating 420 in
Shame on you.
Agreed.
Shame on you.
a green way,
share.
they might be poking smut.
Oh, that's right. And today is National Marijuana Day. I've never even seen marijuana. So
All right, it's a funny story. One time, these kids that I went to high school with, they were like, "Hey, you want to come smoke pot with us and do stuff behind the school?" I was like, "Dude, my dad's a Texas Ranger. My mom's a nurse. You really think that I'm the kind of person you should ask that to?" So I was like, "Hey, what's your name? Where do you live?" "Well, we don't want to talk to you anymore."
yeah,
pal."
we're done. We're done.
But that may be why I was never invited to parties in high school.
So okay, I'm almost positive that my husband's explained to me why it's today. Why is it today? Why? What is it about 420 that?
It's the what is it? What time is it
I get high on life.
Me too.
All right. So anyways,
So
let's.
it's 5 o'clock somewhere, that kind of thing? Is it
No,
that?
that's alcohol.
Yeah, no, but is it that?
I don't know.
Huh.
I think
We'll
it's
have to
just
figure that out.
it's just the end of the day, the end of the work day. Hey, let's go have a smoke, and the rest of the day, I guess.
Anybody on Facebook?
At
can
420.
tell us
No,
who
God, no!
won?
Don't open that door.
Huh.
All right. So let's get back to your idea of exogenesis.
Yeah, let's get high.
Okay, so yeah.
Away from the Earth.
So
Let's get high on science.
Would y'all like to
Intelligent.
take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Okay.
are we off?
If I do this right.
So we'll still be live on Facebook for those of us that are still tuning in. Are you freaking out over there? You're like, oh no.
Do you want me to leave
Is that the
Facebook?
guy from Power Rangers?
I doubt it.
Do you want
No,
me to leave
it's-
Facebook?
Yeah, leave Facebook up.
It was funny when you said something about somebody being hot. I'm thinking, I dare not say anyone's hot after forgetting my own anniversary. So that's where my mind went. And then we went in
Fish people.
500 different directions.
So
That's
what?
funny.
So once
He
what,
harmony matched me with her.
is he working right now? Is he at home
Okay, so
going?
yeah, no, he's out of town. Working.
He's out of town.
Yes, sir. He reminded me 2 days ago, and I still failed to remember.
Our anniversary is 6 days before my birthday, so
420, according to Jeffrey Wayne Smith, who is just a
A wealth of knowledge.
wealth of knowledge this evening. 420 is when they got home from school. Why are you just getting home from school at 420?
Oh. Huh.
back in the day.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
true because you pretty much bailed. But I mean, is that across the board, across the United States? Like, hey, everyone's getting home. Let's.
I don't know which days I'm confused.
I wasn't a hoodlum like y'all were, apparently.
When I was in theater,
Yes, we know you weren't.
Were
Too
you
funny.
in any student activities, Denise?
I was on the drill team my entire high school, and I was in choir.
I tried
Aw.
out for the drill team. They
Yeah.
wouldn't let me go. Said I had ulterior motives, which was probably right.
Yeah,
Same reason they wouldn't let me on the cheerleading team.
we didn't have any guys on the drill team at that point.
Steve Martin, Rick Perry. There are several other guys that
Will
were
Ferrell?
Male cheerleaders.
Hey.
Are you sure the commercials are actually running?
yeah, I'm listening to it.
You rock.
Oh, you're the best.
Yeah, because the other night,
Absolutely. Sure. Want that one?
Oh, awesome.
did you name your meteorite?
What do you want to say?
No, I didn't. I
No.
honestly never really gave that a thought.
Did you
Does it need a name?
did you
Noah.
did you kind of think where it may have come from? And do you have any
I genuinely did not give it much thought, and holy shit, I just paid $5 for a meteorite. That was about the extent of my thought on it. And I mean, it's still neat to have because this is a piece of another world.
yeah.
This is something that's not from anywhere near here. And I mean, this is a piece of the universe. I mean, everything's a piece of the universe. But this really is. And, Chad, I wish you could see it because, I mean, you see the little specks of all of the other stuff that's in there. And
Yeah.
it's one of those, the more you look at it, the more you examine it, you see things that you didn't see before.
I understand that because
Because this is from your home planet, right?
What-
Clatuberata
What
Nicta.
planet did you guys come from?
but it's kind of like me in school. Like
What are you in, my
you learn
kindergarten?
every fourth grade.
Oh,
Fourth
excuse me,
grade,
You're huge
but-
for a fourth grader.
Fourth
It's like your
grade.
third or fourth time around, or how does that
Actually.
work? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm touching a nerve here.
You know, your jokes can either be funny or mean.
Well,
And
Hey, you
you
still
know who
got
the host of this show is? It's not you.
you still got you
I like
you,
it.
you, you still got to come up with two more possibilities because what is a bear without teeth?
Toothless bear.
If that
Is
counts,
that unbearable?
Do you know?
I do, but
Any
I'd like
idea?
to see it
Okay, I'm
fled.
curious because I haven't.
it's
come up
right
with
there
it.
in front of you. It's going to be so simple. You're going to be like,
Oh,
Bear
oh! I
without
just got it.
teeth.
I just got it, and it just came to me.
what is it? La 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 la.
he's writing it down.
Aw,
Aren't you?
he's not. No, he whispered in my ear.
What is it?
It just came to me.
Isn't there a song?
There is. But don't play it because whenever we play music on here, our shows get erased.
Oh, I was going to sing it.
I'm
Copyright announcement.
How does that song go? Gummy bear. I am a gummy bear. A Smurf.
Smurfs taste really good if you fry them.
I think it,
butter.
That vegetarian?
Smurfalicious.
Okay, so I just have a little joke to
Well, there's only one
go
female
on
Smurf.
to the just to go out. Where does butter come from? I know.
Butterflies.
Exactly.
Because I'm brilliant.
Right.
That's why.
I
Yeah,
was
you're
gonna
fine.
Science.
I was gonna tell this butter joke, but I'm afraid it might spread.
That one.
All right, so we're back.
45 seconds.
Okay. You never heard "You're the Devil in Disguise" by Otis?
No.
That's like one of the best songs.
No.
No.
Oh, that's a great song.
Why can't I actually speak? Mom, was that actually speaking?
On Facebook.
Yeah. So
Actually.
everybody in the 4th grade all know that you're here. Will I am.
Hey. Hey.
Wearing his
It's not Will I Am?
neon green shirt.
All right.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, go.
And we are back. Hopefully, are we back? We are back on Johnson County Paranormal, where we're going to be discussing tonight about the idea of exogenesis. Now, Denise, I'm sitting here looking through these books, which are phenomenal, and I'm seeing a lot of historical artifacts in here. I'm seeing a lot of, well, there's the creation of man, which is
Yeah.
one of the paintings on the Sistine Chapel, and that looks like a Neanderthal almost.
Yes.
So I'm seeing a lot of anthropological and a lot of archaeological and a lot of really commonplace items, things that people are familiar with through popular culture. So if I'm understanding your idea of exogenesis right, it's that the actual history might be a little bit different than what we were taught in school, that there's more extraterrestrial divine elements at play in some of these.
So if you're looking at it from a Christian point of view, then yes, I believe that. I don't believe in a Big Bang theory. I don't believe in the alien theory.
Okay.
I do believe definitely that there was a creation and God created us, but I also believe that because of Satan's fall, that he tries to mimic. Because if we look later on in the Bible, and I'm trying to think of the book that I wanted to quote, but I can't. So later on in the Bible, the Bible describes why
Well,
Satan
and-
fell and that he wanted to be worshipped like a god.
Yeah, that's somewhere towards the end of the book of Genesis, because didn't Satan lead a rebellion
He
against
did.
God?
Yes, very much so.
And got him and all of his buddies kicked out of heaven for
Yes.
all eternity
Yeah.
afterwards. And it's funny because I was thinking as we were talking about this, the Bible talks about a lot of what could be considered extraterrestrial type stuff. It talks about chariots of fire. It talks about, I think there's a couple of instances of these monstrous winged creatures that are not necessarily angels coming down from heaven.
Right.
There's one creature, and I forget what it's called, but it has like 8 sets of wings, and one of the wings covers its face, and there's two or three on the back, and there's one where
Right.
the legs should be, and it's just, I mean, it's monstrous, and that certainly doesn't kind of meld with what we would consider an angel. That would be more maybe on a demonic or a monstrous
I think so.
side.
Evil,
Okay.
definitely.
Um,
So, you
certainly
know,
not of this world.
the cool thing about the Book of Enoch and the Book of Enoch is mentioned in the canonized Bible, and then of course we talk about Enoch. Enoch's mentioned in Genesis chapter 4, I believe, where he walked with God and then he was no more. But these demonic creatures that fell from heaven actually went to Enoch and said, "Go petition for us, beg God to forgive us," and of course God wouldn't. And so I believe if you can put all of this information together and look at it in order historically, I certainly believe that these creatures fell with Satan, but then they also had remorse. to some
Okay.
degree. And then when God said, you know, he wasn't going to forgive them, then they just began to corrupt the earth.
Now, as I'm sitting here listening to this, one of the ideas that's coming to me is I've heard several fundamentalist Christians at one time tell me one version of this or the other, but they actually consider dinosaurs and some of the prehistoric monstrous animals that we had to not be creations of God, but to be something that the devil made.
So
Either-
I disagree with that. I
Okay.
believe that God made dinosaurs. I believe that he made them herbivores.
Okay.
And then, of course, when these angels fell, and they corrupted all of God's creation, it wasn't just the human race. It says that they corrupted everything that God created.
Okay.
And so, in that case, they created these monstrous type dinosaurs because of their
T-Rex.
Well, and that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like, okay, so God made all of the dinosaurs herbivores. What, or would Tyrannosaurus Rex?
and I believe
fall
that
in?
we were vegetarians
Okay.
initially too.
Some of us still are. So, all right,
Indeed.
if would Tyrannosaurus Rex and Velociraptor and some of the predatory dinosaurs, would that fall into the category of, okay, those are the ones that God made, or these were the ones
The ones that
came-
were tainted, I
were
believe so.
tainted? So, if you're, and I'm just asking a question.
Sure.
If you're 18 feet tall, you have sickle claws on your feet. You have teeth that are as long as bananas, serrated like steak knives, the most powerful sense of smell in the entire animal kingdom. How does that befit a herbivore? How does that work for something that eats plants?
So, is that how God created him? Is that how he initially started? Or was he genetically altered by these angels who had and you have to remember that, so let me back up a little bit. Dr. Michael Heiser actually brought out this scripture in Psalms that talks about, especially in Hebrew history, when you look at the Talmud and the Tanakh, they talk about gods. And they're not just saying the one God, they're talking about gods as in this community of celestial beings.
So
and
could
so
that-
they refer to all of them as gods.
Could that go back to when he gave Moses the Ten Commandments, and one of the Ten Commandments was, "You shall have no other gods before me"?
Absolutely.
So there could be other stuff out there, but we as
Sure.
Christians are only supposed to focus on the one.
The one.
Okay.
And, you know, I think that before God even created man, and that goes back to when, you know, a lot of times Christians will say, well, you know, the world can't be millions of years old, or things can't be millions. I disagree completely, because the Bible says that God's day is of 1,000 years to him, and then our day is, so, I mean, we can't put a timeline on God. I believe that there could have been millions of years
Sure.
from let there be light to him creating a human being. And if you look at it historically and you lay it out and you can be open-minded about it, there's a whole lot of time for a lot of different events
yeah.
to take place.
And-
So absolutely,
And
yes.
I think that's one of the things that you have to we have to remember when we think about the Bible, when we think about these ancient, very important, very, very wonderful books, is that we don't need to see them as more than they are. The Bible is only, and I feel like we've had this talk on here before, the Bible is only a snippet of a much larger world. It's only bits and pieces of one particular culture. And I think we do ourselves a real disservice when we try to interpret it as
Literal.
With
as-
narrow minds.
literal, with narrow minds, and as a science book. I think it's a great history book, but it's not a complete history book. And you
But
gotta
don't tell the
remember-
Christians that, they get upset.
And it's like Sasquatch would always say, history is written by the winners. So who knows how much stuff got edited out, how much stuff didn't make it to that final cut. I mean, because there's an entire series of biblical books. The Apocrypha, which were some of the stuff that you were talking about, comes from that didn't make it into the dozen or so versions that Christians use today. So, I mean, there's no telling what kind of cool stuff we're missing out on. And
Not unless you're looking for it. You go looking, you go digging, you find some pretty interesting things. And again, I'm not saying that all of this is absolute, but I do think that it's very probable.
Sure.
So I'm going to go just a little bit further, and probably if there's any Christians listening. I'm going to offend them. But so if we're playing this cosmic chess match between God and Satan, why would Satan want to corrupt what God had created? Was it to simply mimic, or was it to taint a bloodline that would prevent Christ from being born? So when you look at the few people that made it onto the ark, and that and it says literally that their bloodline was pure, we interpret it that Noah was this great man. But the Bible says very clearly, it didn't matter which interpretation you read, that the bloodline was pure.
Okay.
And so if you look at that, why would the bloodline need to be pure? And ultimately it would lead to a clean genetic bloodline
Which makes
for
sense
Jesus to be born.
scientifically. So where in these books does it say anything else about? Does it say anything about the fact that in every world culture, every indigenous culture, that there is some variation on a flood story?
There's a variation in every religion on that flood. So if we're talking Hindu, if we're talking Muslim, there is a story about a great flood throughout all of these books.
And the fact that everybody has one, that hints at a universal truth to me, because people on this continent, people up here, people down here, they're not just going to come about with the same random story with a lot of the same facts.
Right.
There's got to be something in that collective memory, in that racial memory, if you will, that says, hey, this is what happened a long time ago, and this was super bad. So,
And water is purifying. Water is cleansing.
water repels evil. I did not know that until recently. That's why in some of the Salem witch trials that they did in the colonies and even in Europe, one of the ways that they would try and prove that someone was a witch was by drowning them. And if the person was a witch, the witches would be evil, and the water would push them back. So instead, they just ended up drowning a whole bunch of what were probably pretty nice ladies and just fringe members of society.
I believe, even with something like that, I believe that there was an issue. I believe something was happening. But anytime you have human beings involved, they can take it too far, get too... one person, if they're gaining power by exacerbating this one little issue, then of course it turns into a huge
Okay, so
witch hunt.
Right.
Yes.
between the two, let me go towards the geologist and then go towards yours. If for some people they say that Earth is 6,000 years old, as a geologist, paleontologist,
It's incredibly problematic because, number one, if you don't even have to be a geologist, but there are sequoias that are over 6,000 years old. There are all kinds of, I forget what it is. I'm sorry, because I'm trying to pull from this knowledge in my mind. But there are animals that we found that are even a little bit older than that. Don't hold me to that, because you ever say something, when it comes out you realize that's not quite right. But there's a lot of evidence that suggests our world is a whole lot older. Then you look at the Grand Canyon. You look at fossil deposition. There's a whole lot that suggests that the world has got to be older than 6,000 years.
so is it the popular knowledge that if it's 6,000 years old, the fossils are a test or
The fossils, they're either a test or they're misinterpreted. Another thing that comes from that is, let's call it ignorance. You guys know what the difference between being ignorant and being stupid is?
Ignorance, you don't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
You're not being given the knowledge. Stupid, you can give the knowledge and you're not using it.
Right.
certain learning academies in Cleveland?
Here I was trying to take the high road. Yeah. Yeah. Cluster Fluck Academy. Absolutely. All right. So.
They're just stupid.
Yes, they are. Oh, you're great. You're going to come next week, right? All right. So. My name is Greg Kaufman. I'm a liberal comic.
Oh.
I hate the president. Okay, we're going to stop right there. All right. Okay, so have our moment of zen here. Let me get centered. All right. For some people, it's easy to know one story, one explanation, to read one book, than it is to read a whole lot of other books. And I admire faith. I wish that my faith was stronger than what it is. But faith becomes dangerous when it makes you oblivious to other explanations, to other people's viewpoints. That's where militant Islam comes from. That's where those Westboro Baptist Church wackadoos come from. Someone's faith should be between them and God.
Yeah.
You should never use it to judge someone. You should never use it to cram down someone else's throat, because the minute that you do that, it's soiled. It's not pure anymore.
But at the same time, if you're willing to, God is like super amazing, and to me, he's extremely
puts up with a lot too.
Well, yeah, but there's so much to him. He's just like a wealth of. He just causes me to well up with curiosity. Yeah. I want to know more about him. I want to know, and especially when you start to see that there's so much history that's being uncovered, that there's so much that's being brought to the light. Why wouldn't you want to know? And that would make your faith even stronger when you realize that. And I didn't come up with the phrase that, God being a homicidal God. I didn't. No. It's in some of the stuff that I've studied and read and
Old
people
Testament
I've listened
God
to.
was a vengeful.
But he wasn't.
Yeah.
If you go back and you look at the reasons as to why all of these things took place, they had to.
He was more like a stern parent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And I don't think he was killing his creation. He was trying to save his creation, but yet we teach in Sunday school to our children that he killed his own creation, that he killed his own. Well, how many times? And even some of the stories where when he says to go in and kill the village, the entire village, leave nothing standing and take none of their idols. Well, again, it was part of that corrupt bloodline, and he had to maintain a pure bloodline in order for Jesus to be born and fulfill his purpose.
So would some of these other gods that you talk about, would these be ones that we would know from mythology? Would this be like some of the Norse gods, some of the Greco-Roman gods, some like Zeus and Thor and Odin and Athena and all of those people?
I believe so.
Okay.
Osiris, if you, and I love this, and I wish I had the material in front of me so that I could state all of this accurately, but Osiris has 20-something names, but it's because during that, so the origin of Osiris, we look at...
He's the one with the bird head, right? Like the eagle head? Or is that somebody else?
I think that's someone else.
Okay.
So, but Nimrod,
Falcon,
the guy who erected the Tower of Babel, do you remember that? Okay, so when God destroyed the Tower of Babel, because in Genesis it says that this guy was going to succeed in what he endeavored to do. God said so. And so he had to destroy the Tower of Babel. And when he did, he confused all of their languages.
This is true.
And so when they went away from the Tower of Babel, Nimrod became Osiris, became all of these different, and I wish I had this stuff in front of me. It was neat, though, because now there's all of these people who speak different languages who are talking about Nimrod, but he's become a god, and he's become all of these different people. But it's still, the history goes back to him.
It's the anthropological game of telephone. Somebody over here hears it.
Yes.
They try to pass the message on to the next person, and it gets changed.
And in different languages.
In different languages. But where I've always looked at the origin of languages from my academic pursuits is I have never really considered the Tower of Babel as, say, a valid, not a valid, but I've always seen it as maybe more of a simplistic explanation to explain why we don't talk the same way that people in China do or that people down in South America do. Couldn't you also explain the origin of languages as different people going to different places and learning to communicate in different ways than people who are, say, 2 continents over?
I absolutely won't try to deny that.
Okay.
But at the same time, when you study the building of the Tower of Babel and what Nimrod set out to do, he found what he felt like was going to be a portal, a way to get to God. And he set out to corrupt and get to somehow, and whether his thinking was good or we know what he was thinking, or would he actually be able to succeed? I want to say yes, because the Bible says that he was going to, and so that's why God had to stop it. So I do believe that at that time they truly did walk away speaking, was it like 72 different languages?
Oh, and it's more now.
And
with
so-
the dialects and all of that stuff too.
Well, from that point though, from that one event, I think it's 72 different languages. But I mean, of course, absolutely, we know that from just the English language, how many different we've got Ebonics and we've got all of these different, you know.
What you talking
So
about?
of course,
Playing kind of the skeptic in this a little bit.
sure.
This was something that I've learned, and someone is I'm willing to say I'm wrong. From you're talking about God doing one thing and Satan coming back on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, going back and forth. Now, I know we're just taking the biblical version. You're talking about Old Testament version. That was written in what language?
Originally Hebrew.
Yeah,
Aramaic.
which I would say both answers would probably be valid.
I don't disagree with that. I don't.
Now, what's interesting is the stuff that from my understanding, and I am not a scholar whatsoever. I'm more of a skeptic. From what I understand, and this is where my head. This is why I kind of really like this show, because we're talking about all different kinds of stuff, from aliens to God to creation to languages. But in Aramaic, Satan is a verb. So ponder on that for a second on 420. It's not a noun.
Yeah.
Satan is a verb.
So, can you use that in a sentence? I'm curious.
So when describing Satan, it is action. It is
A behavior.
doing wrong. It is the action of something. So
Going home and raising little hell, basically.
instead of a being that's existing in the underworld, red with horns and a trident, it's action. So it could be that the people were trying to say Satan is doing bad things. It's rather than
Well, as you mentioned that, I'm reminded of a story, and it kind of ties into your ancient alien exogenesis thing. But this was a story that was, I believe, it was first recorded in, say, the late. Well, it came to attention in the late 70s, and it was about when the devil actually went down to Georgia, and he was looking for a soul to steal, because he was in a bind. He was a few behind, so he was willing to make a deal. I can get the whole song, but I'll
Love
stop
this
now.
story.
Okay, so I don't disagree with some of the Old Testament was written in Aramaic, but what I will say is there definitely were portions that were written in Hebrew, and the reason that I say that is because when, again, in the book of Enoch, he describes he's writing kind of the book of Genesis over again, and he calls Satan the Nakash. Well, when you look at the definition for what Hebrew people would have called the Nakash, it was a light. It was a strange being, yet Adam and Eve weren't afraid of it, so they recognized that it wasn't something to fear. But the Nakash came from Hebrew and that definition. But at the same time, I agree with the premise that it's an action. But I also believe that there has to be a force behind that action.
okay.
Make sense?
Sure.
The
So
dark side.
I've been dying since last week to get, and maybe it's too early, to get back to the spirits that you were speaking of.
Okay.
The
The disembodied spirits of the dead Nephilim.
Nephilim. So, in from what you're studied, believe these are spirits that are wearing technological suits that allow them to be invisible.
Okay, so let me just say that my what I've read, what I've studied throughout some of the Jewish history, is that they're demonic. Those because those the giants the Nephilim were created by a human female and a god, if you will, an evil god at that. So we have this hybrid giant who is superhuman, super strength, all of these crazy things. And so when he dies, he can either go to heaven or hell. And so he is in limbo, and he's evil, and he's either nosy or doing bad things. So, okay, and as far as the, I forget how Steve Cole puts it, it's like a technological suit. I'm not completely sold on the alien theory that's
Well,
where I don't discount it though either, and I think that's where.
And how we doing on time? Because it feels like,
Want to take a break?
yeah, let's take a break because that can actually tie into something really cool. So we're going to take a break for a few minutes, and then we're going to jump right back on that horse, and we're going to talk about something really neat when we come back.
Yeah.
When we get back.
Ask Josh. This is his program.
What's that?
not mine.
Can I speak when we get back?
Well, what are you
want
going to say?
speak on? Let me look up, because I can't remember what he calls that.
I don't completely know, but
Well, if you come up with something worthwhile.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I could tell what I learned.
Don't run the
Yeah,
chair
back up.
over on the little dogs. Yeah. But yeah, we can. I'm definitely open to that.
And
What are you open to? What'd you say?
Freaks me out until I remember that there's a delay.
Hey, relax.
Do what about a delay?
There's a delay.
What does that mean?
Like when on between what live
Mm-hmm.
and what's playing on TuneIn, there's
Mhm.
about a 15-second delay.
Yeah.
15 seconds. Because I was like, oh my god.
Let's see, maybe I
And
can find
like-
it in this
and
one.
sometimes stuff like that might happen.
Live radio, yeah.
And live streams on YouTube and stuff.
William, would you pour some water into this bowl for
Yes.
this young
I
lad?
really don't know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you
Don't
have
get
any?
lost.
I know the delay.
Okay. So you're smarter than you look, right? That was quick. Okay. I like that. It's fun. when
Okay,
they find
Chad,
that.
here we go. This book reveals the future of the terror that will soon face human beings. Monstrous creations are being developed with secret technology in labs all around the world. Exogenesis is the
Welcome to Jurassic World.
all right, buddy. All right. Yeah, I got it. Exogenesis is the production of an offspring entirely different from either the parents transformed through the addition of DNA from an alien or an animal to normal genetics. The result of this will be comic book superheroes come to life, living creatures with mythical abilities, unlike anything mankind has ever seen for thousands of years, and which inspire the ancient legends of gods and goddesses. So, again, it ties back to that myth come to life stuff. This horrifying future targets God's original creation for corruption. Evil forces hope to use fallen angel technology to shift the balance of power from God and mankind to Satan and his followers. Monsters will soon be presented into our...
Are we live?
No. That's not...
Just don't pick your nose.
We're not supposed to?
They'll hear you. Alright, it still didn't say what I wanted it to say.
I have that effect on people.
But are we on Be Right Back on Facebook?
Where were you wanting to go? What was your...
So we're live on
Oh,
Facebook?
I was.
Josh wants to stay
So,
live.
Oh, I'm good.
just
Okay.
for you Facebook
I don't wanna
guys
spoil
out
it.
there, and if y'all watch YouTube, please,
Are you going to post this live on your YouTube channel?
no, my phone's on the chair,
You
but,
can still take it off Facebook and post it on your YouTube channel.
yeah, but, just, since we're live on Facebook, just go ahead and go to YouTube and subscribe to capital D
Oh my word.
IA
So you're wanting to promote yourself.
MONV, no space, capital BOY,
Oh my word.
662.
It's $20.
There you go.
It's a commercial.
Pay up. That's a long commercial at that.
Yes.
Y'all ready to go back?
We are.
And if it has, can they see us through the cameras?
Not you.
We're there.
And we are back on Johnson County Paranormal, where we're having a really interesting discussion about exogenesis and the potential of alternate and some really interesting history. We've got a lot going on Facebook this evening. We've got 3 viewers. We want to say hi to our good friend Jeffrey Wayne Smith, who's always with us. Jeffrey had a comment: vampires can't cross water. Well, actually, Jeffrey, that depends on the kind of vampire and the culture that the vampire comes from, because certain vampiric varieties in Norse mythology and in some of the Alaskan islands and even out in the South Pacific, those vampires have to cross water to get the prey items.
Can't cross holy water.
Could be. Also want to say a special hello to my little brother Trace Payne, who's watching from somewhere down near Houston, and also to Susan Thomas. Susan Thomas is an old friend. So guys, we are always glad to have y'all tuning in, and please feel free to comment, write questions, let us know that you're there, most definitely. So before we went to break, we were talking about, remind us where we were, because you can probably get me there a little bit better than I can.
Oh, what were we talking about, Chad? I completely forgot what we were talking about.
This is radio professionalism.
Well,
at its best.
Rewind the
All right.
tape.
No.
I think I've got it, and feel free to do a course correct.
Okay.
But okay, so you've got these non-human, not very nice creatures that die. Giants, monsters, dragons, all that stuff. They don't get into heaven.
Right.
They're in a limbo, if you will.
Sure.
So they come back, and they're kind of the evil spirits. They're the bad things that we know about now. Now, what's interesting is that as cultures change over time, the mythologies change, even the supernatural beliefs change. Do you think that there is a way that what we call aliens now could have been considered ghosts at one time, or even like fairies and elves way back in the day? That maybe it's, if your premise is correct, that these things, our understanding of them is shifting, our names for them are shifting, and perhaps they're even altering their appearance to better ingratiate themselves in our culture. Because if you think about now, aliens would be the way to go, because we are a fledgling species that is just reaching out into the stars. We want to know if there's anybody else out there. We have all kinds of great outer space related stuff in our culture. We've got Star Trek, we've got Star Wars, we've got all of those cool alien movies. You go back 100 years, the big thing was Ghost. You have some great Victorian ghost stories. You have Ghost in A Christmas Carol. You have Edgar Allan Poe writing about Ghost with stories like The Raven. Prior to that, it was elves and leprechauns and little people. What if all of these things are connected? What if it's manipulating itself? If it's, I don't want to say a shapeshifter, but what if it's adapting as our
Language and our
language
thoughts.
and our thoughts and our technological abilities progress, because it's keeping up with us?
Well, okay.
It's just a thought that popped out to me.
Okay, but along the lines, because I was talking with somebody about our show tonight and how our understanding, and please forgive me if this is offensive to your belief on the alien aspect. So, what did everyone say, and Jennifer's going to chime in, about what aliens used to do in 60s, 70s, and in the 1980s?
Probing?
What?
Probing or abducting?
Yes, probing and all of these different things that they had.
I just went to South Park.
Yes. So,
It's an anal part.
so
Well, there's
Now-
only so much you can learn from, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is where it was kind of cool. One of my heroes, he has long since believed in his rock and roll life that he was touched by an alien, but he doesn't believe.
Elliot, be good.
But not in any kind of probing sense. He was like, dude, it's like download. He said, nowadays we have Wi-Fi, we have all of these different things. You're telling me that an alien has to probe, but in the past, that was the only concept that people had. There was no concept in the 80s or 70s of Wi-Fi. So our understanding of technology that can go through skin, like MRIs and X-rays and other things,
Okay.
have changed. And so he never said I was probed. He said I had an alien visit me. I know I was asleep, but I'm very aware that the alien was there, and he's written many songs about it, but he never says it was painful, it was never this, it was never that. He believes he was visited by an alien, but really brought it into the understanding of Wi-Fi, an untouched type sense. So does that how does that align with your belief in these
Nephilim.
So
Nephilim?
Nephilim. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around the whole alien thing. However, and I know that seems kind of bizarre coming from someone who just told you about giants and all kinds of crazy stuff, but
It's okay. This is a safe place. We're not
but
here to
if
judge.
you if you look at all of the stories and people who've been abducted and listen to how their experiences, and I've even watched a few documentaries where people were able to catch these beings on film. Were they aliens? Were they demons? Were they ghosts? We may not ever know. It may not be something that in this lifetime we get an answer to.
Well, then let's talk about these aliens. You talk about catching them on film. Now, the most prominent type of alien that we're familiar with in pop culture are what's referred to as the Greys, and they're the little anywhere from 3.5 to 5 feet tall, humanoid shaped with very slight limbs, pretty similar in build to a female child, but they have gray skin and these massive heads and these dark, piercing black, almond-shaped eyes. And while they're certainly not the only species, and I'm going to say species just because I'm a science
Sure.
fan, that's where my mind goes. While they're certainly the most prominent, maybe even the most common species that has been encountered, they're by no means the only type. But I wonder too if it kind of goes back to what Chad was saying, where we don't have words yet in our vernacular to explain what we're seeing, to explain what we're experiencing. So we're trying to piece it together with stuff that we know. And because we know the humanoid body plan, we know we're seeing these things the way that our mind comprehends them. Would that be within the realm of power of some of these creatures that you described?
Or you know what? If it's a spirit, what
Spirit. There we go.
if it's a spirit, evil spirit, do they have limitations? What are their limitations? Can we comprehend how technologically advanced they are
Sure.
compared to where we are? Because if these angels fell from heaven and they knew what God knew, then I would say that they can outthink us and are far more advanced than we will ever be. So, and a lot of times, like the alien abduction folks say that they're trying to get information from us. I I can't imagine why. Why are they not?
My
Why would they want anything that we know?
my thought with that was always, if and I'm looking at it from a different school of thought than you are, but I always kind of saw them as, when our scientists go out and we tag wildlife, we put the earrings on the ears of the cows, or we put the implants in the neck of the elk, and we track them, and then a few months later we pick them up not too awful far from we got them, and we check their blood levels. We check all that
and
stuff
that's a
out.
pretty common theme of people who say they've been abducted.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And one of the interesting things, though, is that there is a small artifact, if you will, which was actually recovered from, I want to say, either the hip or the neck from a alien abductee, and it doesn't match anything here on Earth. And it's from it seems to be of a technology that we just don't understand. We don't understand. We don't really know how it was made, what it does, and it doesn't match any of the components that we have to build stuff like that. And it's a pretty strong evidence for whatever this phenomena is and its
Yes.
true nature.
And if somebody wants to look into that a little bit more, and I can look into L.A. Marzulli actually does a lot. Again, he's Christian, but he looks at and studies all of these different people who have been abducted, and they all have one thing in common, and that's the markings after having been abducted that have been proven that we couldn't have, the material couldn't have come from anywhere on Earth, and the markings are identical. So, there's a lot of, I don't ever want to discount, again, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that. However, when you have so many people that have experienced the same thing repetitively, and we have somewhat researched and
There's truth
proven,
there. There's evidence
there's some
for
kind of
that.
truth.
Yeah.
There's something happening for
Something's
sure.
most definitely going on. Will, you've been chomping at the bit here. You have something you'd like to add?
Well, I believe in only part of it because, just go towards, well, never mind because it might be classified, but,
If you tell us, you'd have to kill us.
Indeed.
but,
So you don't
it
believe in
might just
aliens?
be yes and no to a point. I do believe in, demons and the devil, and I think that aliens just might be, like, demons in disguise.
Okay.
And, I'm thinking that they came up with this, some
You
kind
know
of...
who else is a demon in disguise? Chad?
Devil in a blue dress.
You know who else is the demon in disguise, Chad?
I'm lost. I was listening so close to.
No, this is going to be a Greg Kaufman jab, but it's fine.
Uh,
You missed your cue.
No. So Chad,
Sorry.
you've brought some
Devil in a blue dress, devil with a blue dress on.
you've brought some interesting ideas as far as the different languages. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's look at this
You're
from
always
a
quiet.
young man's perspective. You're in the 4th grade, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about some of the crazy stuff that we talk about here?
Not all
Some
of
of these
it,
big
just...
weird books that your mom reads.
I don't believe in all of it, but I do believe in some of it. And I'll point what I know about, the history of the devil.
Okay.
So, you know God's kingdom, right?
Mhm.
The
Is that the
devil...
Magic Kingdom?
Right on the magic school bus.
Oh my
Mom's getting into
gosh. Mom, seriously?
So, all right, we'll come back to you in a second, Chad.
Hey.
Come back.
So when you're describing all of this, I can't help but to equate some of it, and again, just not out of no disrespect, Scientology.
Oh yeah, there's a fun one. Now, yeah, let's go down that path.
I mean, I
You're
so-
not going to offend me at all, and yeah, no, I see the parallel for sure.
So that's why it's kind of like, okay, I'm trying to understand, and from what I have not. I can watch some of Joe Rogan, and I can take some of the Scientology things, but there was one that was really interesting that someone had brought up is when you basically get down to the absolute core, when you have studied and you have reached the Thetan, and I'm totally talking out of my ear as far as what all that means. But basically, when you get the most enlightened, the aliens that we're talking about are in every cell of your body.
So they're like the midi-chlorians from Star Wars. I wish William was in here because he could. Yeah.
I just
So
shoot him out.
they are at the cellular level. Each of one of these aliens are there and controlling parts of your body. So when you are having an ailment in one part of your body, it's the aliens that you need to get audited. You need to do this healthy. You might need to do this, so forth and so on. But supposedly that our house may be egged and so forth by
So when I have cramps, it's really aliens?
something's invaded there and
So
must be cast out.
You know,
foul demons
at
come
44
out.
years old, I believe that to be true, Chad.
You what?
I believe that we are truly possessed by demons during that time.
So, do you guys know what the creation story of Scientology is? What the main formula for what the equivalent of their Book of Genesis is?
I do not.
Okay, and this is kind of funny, and this is one of the things that I actually learned. I learned this from South Park, and I Googled it, and it was completely accurate. So back millions of years ago, and stay with me here because I'm not making this up. I could probably do better if I was. All right, so millions of years ago, there was a.
Can you put on your Tom Cruise outfit while we're talking about this so I can? Yeah.
Pretend I
Okay.
come from Top Gun.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's hot.
Cocktail.
You've lost that love and feeling. Whoa, that love. See, I'm a music box.
For
All right,
cocktail, I went right to Flugelbinders.
you lost me. All right, so anyway,
Very obscure quote.
okay, in Scientology, their premise comes from millions of years ago, there was a galactic empire ruled over by a particularly nasty species of aliens, and this was an empire that covered thousands of other planets, each filled with intelligent life forms, different species. Well, the aliens enslaved all of these other aliens. The bad aliens enslaved the good aliens, put them on a spaceship, and were going to relocate them. That spaceship crashed on Earth, killed all of them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Those alien ghosts didn't have anywhere else to go. So what they did do was they actually came down and possessed Ice Age man. They possessed cavemen. And those alien ghosts stayed with us over the millennia as we progressed and evolved into what we are now. And when we have the cramps, the headaches, all of the stuff that ails us, it's not because of us. It's because of these alien spirits, little bitty alien spirits that are fighting over our bodies and trying to control us and trying to get us to do things we want. And
So do we need to be delivered from these spirits
It would
in order
sound
to
like
be part of the Cyan?
You have to get
Oh.
audited. So auditing is for you to confess and be truthful and to own these different things and to get your body in balance, and they have these different things that help balance us, and I say this with all types of respect. I mean, that's what, for some people, that's their religion, and they believe this, or they're on that way. I'm like, okay, if that's, explain to me how. That's why I'm open. I'm skeptical. I'm saying, okay, for the spirits that you're talking about, the fallen angels that came down here that are demonic, evil, is that what
So
the Nephilim?
yeah, so the angels that fell with Satan simply made a choice to leave heaven.
Okay.
And then of their actions in having sexual relations with women, and the children that they birthed were the Nephilim, the giants, the
Okay.
hybrids, if you will.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's, I believe that those angels are still, and we know that some of them are imprisoned. I think there's 3 of them that are imprisoned in the center of the earth per the Bible. And I wish I could remember the names, but I don't. And so there's 3 of those that will never, ever, ever
interesting, because
be back on the
you
earth
look
again.
at Greek mythology, Roman mythology, that's where the Titans are in
Yes.
prison. They were the ones that their gods had to overthrow before they could take charge of Olympus and
Yes.
our world. So it's another one of those really interesting
Parallel.
parallels.
Mm-hmm.
That's what always confused me growing up, going to Sunday school, reading the Bible, and then also at the same time learning mythology in school and the different Romans and Greeks and their gods and goddesses, and it was like, this is blurry.
Uh-huh.
I was always super intrigued by mythology, and of course, I mean, you guys all know I was raised by my entire family is in ministry, so it's not like I'm knocking my faith at all.
No.
It's just, I think it's looking at all the possibilities and some of the proof of history that existed, and it's a lot for us who were raised on just the Bible and in Sunday school all of our lives, and you go to church on Sunday, and if you don't explore all of the different avenues and all of the different possibilities and look at this history that's been provided to us, it sounds convoluted. It sounds crazy.
And then you go to Greece and you see all of the statues and all of the temples. Go to Egypt and see all the pyramids and
That are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old.
And remember, the
And
Egyptians...
you can't make that up.
No, and the Egyptians are not the only ones that have pyramids.
right.
There's Aztecs have
Yes.
them. Mayans had pyramids.
Yeah,
The North American tribes, they had things that would be similar to pyramids. You know, they had the mounds. They had the stuff that lined up with the stars.
What is the pyramid that's in
Chiapas.
the Mayan?
Um,
I've climbed
Tikal.
one of them.
Machu
Is that-
Picchu?
Now Machu Picchu is
No.
Incan, and that's in Peru. But you're on the right train.
Anyway, the environment really is bizarre. I mean, you feel. I know it sounds crazy, but there is like sort of an oppression in that area, and I can't describe it. And it was really, after having read some of this stuff and knowing the theories, climbing that particular pyramid was bizarre, because a lot of human beings, literally, whether you believe it this way or not,
Yeah.
lost
Yeah.
their lives.
Pyramids were not good places, especially down in that part of the world.
Yeah. Right.
Because the Aztecs and the Mayans were huge on human sacrifices, and
Yes.
that's where they happened, was right at the top of the pyramids.
Chad and I got to climb the back of the giant pyramid in Giza,
Uh-huh.
so he could feel it and touch
Yeah.
it and get the enormity of it. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is top. I mean, it was
It's massive.
To think that it's lasted as long as it has is just astounding. That it's beyond comprehension. Because let's face it, if you're buying a house that was built in the 1960s, that thing's falling apart.
Yes.
So to think that these humans back then have created these structures that have stood the test of time. Now, granted, the limestone's worn away, but look, it's still structurally there.
And sound enough for you to climb it, which makes me wonder, why would God allow it to continue to exist after all this time?
And then
What's he trying to tell us?
What's interesting, if everybody thinks of the Egyptian pyramids, but what is literally right next door to the pyramids that's monstrous?
KFC?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Sphinx.
Sphinx.
No, no.
there really is KC.
There is a KFC. If you think you're like Chad's just doing some sort of weird abstract
Does that
joke,
sound
you're
like Cairo fried chicken? Or-
no. Like, okay, so long story
Still
short,
works if you
so
misspell it.
My camel's name was Moses.
Okay.
mine's was KFC, and I'm like, why is that? And the guy said, it's my favorite place to eat, and I was like, because I haven't eaten it.
You look in the distance. You can see KFC from the pyramids.
That's funny.
Hey, the Colonel
That's
would be
funny.
proud.
Yeah.
But they are an Arab culture, and so chicken is safe.
Apparently, the chicken's
So
not
much-
safe because they're
Right.
gonna eat it.
That's pretty
Sphinx,
collect up,
the
Chad.
Sphinx.
The Sphinx. So could the Sphinx, because that's an interesting hybrid animal that looks similar to some of the stuff in your books. Could that have been inspired by something that early man? I mean, the Sphinx is incorporated into mythology. The Sphinx is a riddler. He's the one that asks questions, and if you don't answer the questions the right way, he eats you. The most famous.
Oedipus? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god, I love that riddle.
Is that the two legs?
What walks on 4 in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 at night?
You know that one?
I do not.
Man. In the morning, he's a baby, he crawls. At noon, he stands up straight as a man. And at night, he walks on 3 with a cane.
Okay. Oh wow, I have not heard that.
That was Oedipus' riddle he had to solve before he could go for it.
Okay.
Have not heard that.
Now, how many Sphinx are there?
Just the one.
Wrong.
There is an avenue of the Sphinx that was just uncovered within the last couple decades.
But are those sphinxes or are those lions? Because I've heard interpretations. Of
It
both.
is.
I mean, I've got pictures.
It's
of
called
it.
the Avenue of the Sphinx. So, long story short, by the Temple of Luxor,
Superman know about that? Like,
Luxor. So down by the Temple of Karnak. So they had lined up, and there's over 700 sphinxes, smaller scale, but about 20 feet tall, and they are lining
I
an
don't think
avenue.
they were that tall.
How old? Any
Well, they
idea?
just uncovered them recently.
So what they were doing is they were
6,000
That's
years.
cool.
They were
That's cool.
they were expanding the road, and as they were digging, all of a sudden they were like, "Oh,
There's
wait a
a sphinx
second,
there.
yeah, yeah." They're like, "There's another one. There's another one. There's another one." So they
They're perfectly spaced.
so they're trying to uncover all of them, but there are some churches and some mosques that are in the way, and they are not ready to unearth them, all of them yet. But there are 700.
See, and
Wow.
we can use ancient Egyptian culture as a parallel to those Mayan jungles. In ancient Egypt, all of that stuff was covered up by sand. It was covered up by the elements. A lot of it was, built into the modern day cities. In places like Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, the jungle reclaimed so much of that. And I remember when I was down in Belize, you could walk through the jungle and you'd think, okay, there's big hills here and hill and here and here and here. Those are not hills. Those are collapsed pyramids, huge structures that after, 1,500 years or so, the jungle has come in there and it is completely reclaimed because nature is really good about taking back what used to be hers. And I'm talking about trees that just spread up anywhere from 15 to 30 feet up in the air, and it's really incredible. And who knows what the desert might be covering
Well,
up.
that's how they discovered Abu Simbel, the 4 statues of Ramses that were sitting there. You tell the story better than I
Okay,
do.
so this kind of goes along with all of our paranormal and everything. So you have to think that this part, and correct me if I'm wrong, baby, that area is the southwest of Egypt. So it is more in the Sahara Desert. So there's a lot of sand. There's a lot of sand in the air. There was an area that all of the villagers refused to go because there were spirits, and these spirits scared them because of their expressions
And their size.
and the sheer grandeur. They were terrified of them, and no one would go there because they would be there, they would be gone. They would be there, they would be gone. Well, finally, it's not Symbol, but
Abu
the
Simbel was the son of Symbol.
right. So basically, what eventually one of the explorers said is, take me there. Take me to where these spirits are. And the only one that would do it was this child. And so he took them there, and as he starts to uncover it and see it, it's the 3 heads of Ramses. And because of the sand coming and covering it up at different points, they thought it were these spirits, because out of nowhere, out of the sand, would be these faces.
And then as the wind would blow, the sand would cover them.
So it took them over time for them to clear the sand away to bring those structures out, so people could see oh my gosh, not only are these huge temples, but they aligned with the solstice.
Yeah.
And it's another prime example of when you don't have the facts to explain something, you reach into your own mind, your own imagination, and you come up with explanations.
It had to be spirits.
It had to be spirits. Just like those old dragon bones that the Indians used to find weren't dinosaur bones, they were from thunderbirds, stuff like that. I love it. That's great.
Yeah. So one thing too, though, that as you're telling that story, what I think about is in the Bible, a lot of times if God came down to talk to someone, he came down to a mountain. So mountains were considered holy. When the angels fell, they fell to Mount Hermon and started trying to be gods. So that, it makes me wonder, is there a connection to all of these pyramids that are high and huge, to especially like in Egypt where there are no mountains, it's just a bunch of sand. They're building their own mountain, they're building their own temple.
And then you've got Mount Olympus with the Greeks.
Yes.
Gods sitting in.
Yep.
Noah's Ark.
That's where the gods
Landed on a mountain.
lived.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
With all the sand spirits and stuff, I actually don't even know what y'all are talking about.
All right then. Thank you very much.
The Space Mountain, does that count?
Space Mountain. It's a mountain. Have a seat, buddy.
So, I mean, I think that really kind of brings a little bit back to the paranormal. I mean, when I heard about the show, I was like, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in this. I'm listening, and I'm kind of like, well, there's an easy explanation for this, or there's not an explanation for this. I guess it is paranormal.
So were you the skeptic on the show? Was that your...
Chad, do you know what paranormal means? What it literally translates to?
Help me out.
Para means beside or next to. And all it means is it's beside the normal, or it's outside of the normal. It's just another way of saying we don't fully understand this yet. And I think the word paranormal gets vilified a lot. People tend to think bad things when they hear it.
Well, and I was scared. I was scared to kind of listen to, because as the famous story, Denise, that like Jennifer just thought, oh gosh, blah 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 blah, because I wrote Josh a comment to him, on Facebook Messenger, that I just thought that the way he poetically explained creation, evolution, and how there is a divinity to it, he really bridged so many gaps, and it came from a scientist, and I was floored. I was like, okay, this was amazing. I was so happy to be in the room when you said it. It helped for me to kind of go, okay, I feel more comfortable now, because I thought paranormal, we're just talking about chasing ghosts and the Loch Ness Monster and Sasquatch and Ogopogo and all of that.
Vampires and werewolves and sparkly vampires.
And stuff that you shouldn't talk about the Bible, because that's sacred. You can't, it's blasphemous. You're silent.
I think it's interesting that you finally, Josh is able to kind of rope you in and get you involved in this, and then here I come with, my strange theories.
I still don't understand. I just still don't understand how. Okay, if they are wearing technology suits. Okay, I'm going back to this.
Okay.
Technology suits that allow them to remain invisible.
Okay.
How are people able to see them?
Okay, let me walk. Stay with me here. All right. Are you familiar with the story or even the movie of The Invisible Man?
I remember that. I only remember that once he took off the bandages, he was invisible.
Okay.
That's
he
all.
was invisible because they were messing around with something that they shouldn't have been messing around scientifically. He took too much of the serum and made himself go crazy. Now, hold on to that for a second, because, all right, so these things, these ghosts, these spirits, whatever you want to call them, they're stuck in a place they don't want to be. They're unhappy. That's the invisible man right there. You can't see them, but you can see what they do. That is the basic premise of a poltergeist. You can't see what's doing it, but you can see what's happening. So what if they're not invisible all the time? What if that's maybe where things like the alien sightings come from, or maybe like the Bigfoot sightings? And I hate to bring her into it, but maybe that's the Loch Ness monster too. Maybe it's any one of these great monsters. Maybe they're a whole lot powerful and a whole lot different than what we understand, and they can just do things that are so outside our realm of understanding.
We only use 10% of our brains.
It's considerably more than that, but that's no, you're good. That's a popular misconception, but yeah.
By going crazy man, do you mean
The
like a
Invisible
guy
Man.
who had too much beer?
No, this guy was it was a chemical that helped turn this man invisible, but it also altered part of his brain, and it made him a whole lot meaner than he should have been.
So basically, just invisible, super drunk man.
No, an
He was a
invisible
drunk.
psychopath.
So I think going back to the alien thing, Chad, I believe that L.A. Marzulli definitely has proof that there's bizarre things happening. Again, that's something I have a hard time wrapping my brain around. I do believe, though, that from a historical point of view, that the war in heaven did happen. Satan was kicked out. He took angels with him. They corrupted Earth as much as they can, which is really so. So the alien thing, I really just don't have a whole lot of because I don't quite believe that fully. It's hard to try to convince someone else. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to say that it's really ironic that we're always talking about the pyramids in Egypt and that sort of thing. And in the Book of Enoch, he talks specifically about teaching men to make weapons and taught men of war, but they also taught women how to paint their faces. And when we look at women with painted faces, Egypt has the most. Not that America's not kind of mimicking that cat eye today, but Egypt had the most bright, prominent. All of them, men and women, were made up. So it makes you go,
Now the Greeks and the Romans did that too.
Yes, not quite as elaborate though.
And
It was
what's trippy is if you go to the Temple of Karnak, they were so advanced in the way they painted that you can still see the painted images today.
yes.
Trippy.
Yes.
We are gonna go ahead.
Just to point this out, at the beginning of the talk show or radio thing, we were talking about I'm just gonna point out to this: skin color doesn't matter. It's not. Goes for the saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Judge somebody how they act, how they do. And I have a Muslim friend who goes to the same school as me.
Yep. Pretty cool.
And
Thank
on
you.
that note, we are going to take a quick commercial break, but we will be back in just a few minutes.
All right, buddy. You had your airtime. Have a seat. No, you know what? I'm not going to ask you again. Either have a seat or go sit out there. I'm not going to ask you again. Please.
What time is it?
Is 8:44.
Sit down.
Where would you like to put a bow on this?
Denise, how do we come to that natural stopping point?
Wow.
The truth is out there.
The truth will set you free.
Okay, so
Testify.
I do have. So
Raise the roof.
someone. So this is. I have talked with a friend of mine.
Yes, sir.
So speaking of kind of paranormal, aside from normal, are we able to leave our bodies and have an out-of-body experience? I have a very sane, rational, highly educated person who is willing to come in and share her story of her near-death experience where she left her body.
That's not Ben Tinsley's friend, is it?
I think that'd be fantastic.
I don't know of who you speak.
Gotcha.
Because if you say that name
You say
two
it
more
kinda is
times,
some- you're right.
yes.
Sorry.
Blah.
But yeah, I would definitely be interested.
So I proposed. I was like, hey, you know, this and that. You know, I'll buy your kids. You know, I won't give the restaurant a name down below. But but I said, and then she was like, we go there all the time. So she's totally willing and excited that she would be willing to come here and talk
think
about
that'd
her
be super
near-death experience.
Definitely. In fact, you might even say we'd be dying to have her.
Wait, you know,
I'm here all night, folks. For
all,
the next 20 minutes.
all of the tune-in folks missed that. I'm really sorry. They
So, Ouija boards. Anybody ever touched a Ouija board?
woo! He goes wild over that.
Really?
Not messing with that.
Jennifer and I have one.
I have a story from high school about that.
Interesting.
We have to wait for Sasquatch to come back because
Sasquatch
those
will veto it.
those two just go. Even just talking about it.
Really? Why?
That's kind of in the same field of touchiness as psychics around here. Sasquatch has his Ouija boards. I have my extraordinary dislike for the common garden variety of Johnston County psychic. Because if you're a psychic and
So
you're
he
watching,
likes
these-
them or does not?
He does not like them.
Okay. I don't think that I want to play with one. I'm just curious
That
what
was-
the thought.
yeah. I don't want to play with one either.
Chad, you experience Ouija?
Yep, I've played with Ouija boards.
Anything?
I even put on Rick
Paranormal?
Springfield in the background to try to summon.
Oh, it's getting romantic in here.
My,
I mean,
my experience, long story short, slumber party with girls I did not know. And my grandpa had just died. And whoever we were talking to said they were talking to my grandpa. And I was like, how? Yeah, right. And he was like, yeah, when he died, he had nose straws. It was a young ghost.
Cannulas, oxygen cannulas.
He died of lung cancer.
Wow.
And it was a new friend of mine and her friends that she knew. We didn't go to the same school.
Wow.
I summoned a Comanche water demon on accident one time, and I don't want to talk about it. Don't ask me how I did that.
There are water witches in my family. I can find water.
I liked my story on divining.
Yeah, that was cool.
Alright, whenever y'all are.
Whenever we're ready. All right, and we are back on Johnston County Paranormal. We're going to finish up with our last little segment tonight, where we've been having a really interesting, really multifaceted discussion on the possibilities of exogenesis. So let's close tonight. Let's kind of wind things down. Let's go around the room and kind of share our thoughts and feelings on this. I know when we were doing the cryptids, we used to give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Chad, do you think we could do a similar thing for tonight's topic?
Plausible, not plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's do that. Let's Jennifer, ladies first. Tell us what you think about this topic. What do you think about stuff that we've kind of gone over tonight?
Oh gosh, I remember contemplating on Sunday afternoon at my grandparents' house with my dad about aliens and why would they not exist with the vastness of the universe, blah blah blah. I believe anything is possible.
Okay. Chad, how about you? Oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer, did I cut you off?
I was just say I haven't experienced a ghost personally. I'd like to, but then it's scary. So I'm not really. I'm skeptical, but I'm not skeptical.
Well, this is when I wish I had my other friend Emma still, because I think she would have been great for this group to go and experiment.
Visit, yeah.
Experience with. Chad, what do you got?
Other lady. So we have. She has anything's possible.
Okay. Denise, how about you?
I do think anything's possible. I think that everything can be scientifically explained or can be uncovered through the research of history, and you have to care enough to go dig for it and find it. It's not always going to present itself to you in Sunday school or come knocking on your door.
It wouldn't be any fun if it did.
No, absolutely not.
And sometimes the easiest way to explain it without going and digging is just to go, oh, it's ghosts, it's this, it's that.
Yes, it's easier than trying to find the source or the origin of where the paranormal is coming from.
And I'm reminded there's a really great series of books that I've kind of gotten into called Monster Hunter International, and they're a team of basically bounty hunters who go and deal with every kind of monster you can think of. And some of the monsters are good, some of them are bad, some of them are just kind of indifferent. And one of the things that they always tell their new recruits is you have to keep a flexible mind. Because if you think one way and you refuse to think outside the box, this job will literally eat you alive. And I took a lot from that. Having a flexible mind is one of the best things I think that a person can have, because you have to allow yourself to be open to certain new experiences to a point. Now, okay, I am the world's worst about being stubborn, about being set in my ways, about being, well, I've never done it that way before, and I'm going to go the way I've done it for the last 30 years, and who the hell are you to try and make me change? But as I get older, the more flexible I try to think, and I think if you want to, I guess if we had to come up with a slogan for this show and kind of what we've spent these last few weeks talking about, a flexible mind is the best thing that a person can have. So I'm going to say sure, why not? I mean, who's to say that this couldn't have been the way it was? There's not elements of truth here. I don't have a problem with that, and I think
It's also kind of like respecting everyone's beliefs. You have the Buddhists who believe in Buddha and Allah and God and all that. You know, it's your belief.
yeah.
Who am I to say your beliefs
Exactly.
are wrong?
Right. And I'm going to offend everybody out there. I don't believe anybody is right. I don't believe anybody has it 100% right, and I don't think that at any point in your life you get to say that someone else is wrong.
Right.
I think God meets us where we are, and
I agree
if
with
we
that.
if we continue to explore who He is, He'll reveal His truth to us. And the same thing, you said something about being scared of ghosts a second ago. I believe that God protects us constantly. He intervenes. He intercepts for us constantly. And I think also if there's a benefit of Him revealing a ghost, an Emma, or if there's a benefit to it, I believe if He sees so fit, then He'll reveal more to us if you have a flexible mind.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that still leaves us with like 15 minutes. doesn't it?
Mr. Duncan, did you have
Chad, anything?
Well, I mean, to say I'm open. I'm still not. I'm still stuck on how can Kathy.
Kathy is our psychic friend who introduced me to Emma.
Oh, okay.
How can she have the power of discovering and being able to not only see but communicate? Because if I go along with your train of thought, then Emma may be one of those spirits that's revealed to certain people. That's the part I can't put my head around is, okay, you are a scientist and you respected it and you were like, how do I embrace this? But
Well, for what it's worth, and I'll say this because she's my friend, and I'll say it because I'm pretty sure she's not watching. I didn't entirely trust Kathy when she told me that. Because I'm thinking, yeah, okay, you can see and talk to somebody that's not there. But it goes back to respect. Kathy was nothing but nice to me. She was nothing but supportive to the museum. She was a good friend. She was a good friend to me and my family. She was always respectful. And it's the golden rule. You do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
I think it's easier to be a skeptic though too, you know, when it comes to psychics and when it comes to people who say they can communicate with ghosts, mediums, those sorts of things, you know, who's the big blonde-haired chick on TV that
Susan Powder?
Yeah.
is that her?
No.
No.
That's Stop the Insanity Lady.
She's big and she's
Are
blonde.
they related? So I have a difficult time with that. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that. Does she convince people that don't appear to be actors? She does, and so I don't know. Again, it goes back to it's a lot easier to be a skeptic than it is to open your mind and
And it's a lot easier to say, oh, she's just crazy.
yes, it
than to
is.
show any.
Because, you know, what is normal? My husband always says that normal is a setting on the washing machine. Because if you're not like me, you're not normal. Well,
I dare to be different.
indeed,
Well, see,
indeed.
I mean, being the open-minded skeptic, I was talking about. I had a classroom of students that there was just so much illness going on that a person that cared very deeply for our family said, "I'm going to pray for the armor of God to be on you. That I'm going to pray for them. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Do this. You know, will you allow that?" I'm like, "Sure." Now, from the wildness, the chaos, came order. Well, also came order because I think that I was open to change with them. I wasn't necessarily open to, you know, hey, you know, if you praying, if you doing that, that's cool. Let's do this. But you know, I'm also going to be recognizing these other things, and I'm still going to be trying to do this. I can't just rely on prayer on this. I've got to change this environment. But at the same time, by the end of the year, we had order.
So someone prayed for you for healing, is what you're saying, and
Yes, ma'am.
and then you got better. Is that
The classroom got better.
okay? Okay, I see. So I'll share this story with you, and again, I think it goes back to faith, and I don't ever want to discount my dad's faith or my grandfather's faith. Their love for God was genuine, and I think that I know that I have a solid faith. My daughter, when she was 4, had a tumor the size of a softball entangled within her intestines. The first report said it was cancerous, and my dad, the man of faith that he is, he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna pray for healing. And at the time, as a mother, I am so, and it's not that I didn't have any faith, it wasn't that at all. I was so overcome by the moment. I was so engulfed in the emotion of everything that was happening, I couldn't think to pray. I couldn't form the right prayer. You know, it just, I was completely consumed with the thought of possibly losing her. And Daddy stood on that. He continued to pray for healing, and they removed the tumor, and it was a very small cancerous, small cancer tumor that was engulfed in this large ball of fat, literally. And
So what was thought as to be the tumor was softball size, it was inside something?
no, it was volleyball size.
Oh my
She
gosh.
literally, and I, bless her heart, I kept taking her to the doctor, and she was like beanpole size limbs, and then she had this, she looked like she was a pregnant 4-year-old. And I kept asking if she had a hernia, and the doctor's like, no, she's just got a big belly. And then ultimately, through a CAT scan for a pulmonary disorder, they found this tumor.
But,
insane.
and this kind of dovetails on kind of everything else, that a little bit more, there's been scientific tests that those patients who are being prayed for, and they've done control groups and done that, tend to do better
Yes.
when there's prayer over them and they don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I appreciate this show, because it's like, Josh, Professor, you kind of bring everything together in this just amazing thing, and I
You
think
give
that
me entirely too much credit, my friend.
But-
entirely too much.
But wait, so TCU, anthropology, geology,
paleontology.
paleontology.
think he has a man crush on me.
It's and vice versa. I promise. Although you're not as pretty as Denise and Jennifer, but you're okay.
All right.
So,
You're better looking than Sasquatch is.
I think he can't hear that.
I'll have to take your word for that.
But you know what? So, but let's look at that. You know, my dad comes from a Pentecostal background where healing and name it and claim it works, and my grandfather, who's Baptist, says that those people are abnormal. So
Normal's relative.
Or are they paranormal?
We're gonna save that. We are gonna save that for next week's episode because we are unfortunately out of time. But we would like to thank everyone who's joined us here tonight and everybody who's stayed with us out there on Facebook land. Until next time, this is Professor Turner.
Denise Tadson.
Chad Duncan.
Jennifer Duncan?
Please like and share our video. Let other folks know every Friday night, 7 to 9, Joco Community Radio.
And tell us who our sponsor is.
Family Toyota Burleson.
And we are good to go.
We off it all?
Oh. Yeah, sorry about that. I had to take a phone call.
My apologies. The child will stay with his father next time.